Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and I think we have a beer today that will be really quite interesting actually. So this is yet another one that I brought back with me from my recent trip over to Blekinge, Kalmar and Öland, and I have to admit that when I was on Öland I did not expect that I was going to come across an example of my native beer style. So we're going to have a look at another brewery that I've never tried anything from, and as I always say, I really enjoy introducing you guys to these very small Swedish craft breweries. You can really find some very good beer in really random places here in Sweden. There's 400 breweries in total in the country now these days. So for this review then, we are going to go to the Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri for the first time, and we're having a taste of the Dunder. So this one comes in at 6% ABV, and it is a Scotch ale, although on the label they're calling it a Scottish ale. We'll talk a little bit more about this style a little bit later on. But as I've always told you on the channel, I've always felt that the Scotch ale is a little bit of an underrated style. I'm a little bit biased, of course, but you know, I would say the same about the German Schwarzbiers, Dunkels, Helles, the Czech Tmavis and all of this kind of thing. I think it's a style that is a little bit kind of underappreciated, if you like, and I always enjoy trying different examples of this style from different parts of the world. I think this is only the second one that I've had from Sweden. The other one was the number 12 from Eskilstuna Ölkultur. I know that Niels Oscar did one as well, but I never got the chance to try it, unfortunately. You know, I've had Scotch ales from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Brazil, the one from Cervejaria Bodebrown, that's a beautiful, beautiful beer. A few from Canada, New Zealand, and a few various other ones from different places throughout Europe. But definitely cool to find another one in Öland, which is a very beautiful part of Sweden incidentally. So very much looking forward to trying this beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. We'll need to just see how we get on with this one. But anyway, as is usual with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, of course. There's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri then, on to my brewery notes. So Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri, as the name suggests, is a farmhouse brewery. Gård, of course, in Swedish, Danish, Norwegian does mean farm, but it can be found in a little place called Köpingsvik, which is a little bit to the southeast of Borgholm on Öland. And Öland is the very kind of thin, long island that you'll find in the very southeast of Sweden. But basically for most of the island it's kind of the same length, and then all of a sudden in the northwestish corner you'll get a little curve, and Borgholm is just on that curve, and you'll find Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri off to the kind of southeast of that, if you like. But this brewery is run by Olaf and Ellen Wahlberg, and it's found on the Skedemosse farm, which has been in Olaf's family for a number of generations. The area that you'll find this brewery in, though, is very well known for Iron Age artefacts, which were first discovered back in the 1950s. In fact, the largest gold discovery ever in Sweden was it took place here, and it had a total weight of 1.3 kilograms, and it's bracelets and different types of jewellery and things like this. But this place was also documented as having been somewhere where the Vikings used to sacrifice animals and people and stuff to satisfy Odin, Tyr and Thor and all of these kind of people. There's actually a museum on the farm as well where a number of these artefacts can be seen. There is a whole like excavation site and things, and you can walk down the path and have a little look at the excavation site and stuff. We drove past this actually when we were in Öland, but it was all closed up, so we couldn't go and have a look at it. But definitely worth doing by all accounts if you find yourself over there. And they also have a farm. They also have a hotel, sorry, on the farm that you can check out if you want somewhere to stay as well. So definitely worth doing by all accounts, like I said. But to go back to the story of the brewery, because we've talked about the local area. So Olaf apparently had been a journalist. He lived in Skåne for a good number of years before returning home to Öland, but he was gifted a homebrewing kit by a friend, but he'd never really been a massive beer enthusiast. But soon after having a go at it, the hobby really gripped him, and he took a lot of knowledge from different books and reading on the internet and stuff like this as well. But when he returned home to his family farm, he renovated the old barn and installed a brewery there, and he brought in the old farm grain crusher out of retirement. He brought that in, kind of restored it, and uses it for the brewery malts to crush it before it goes into the mash tun. But in total, this brewery has a capacity of around 40,000 litres of beer per year, and as of November 2019, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced around 12 different types of beer. So, you know, at 40,000 litres of beer per year, it's a very, very small output brewery. They just do a few different things, but another really cool example of a little farmhouse brewery here in Sweden. These are getting a little bit more popular. Probably the most famous example of a farm brewery in Sweden is Köpingsvik Gårdsbryggeri, you know, the ones who produce the new Sweden IPA, the Turbo Double IPA and things like this as well. So definitely cool to come across another newer sort of small scale version of that, if you like. But yeah, that was all the information I was really able to find about this brewery. There wasn't too much available because it is just a very, very small kind of local company. But if you want to learn more about them, of course, you can check out the brewery website in the description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to see all the different types of beer that they do. One of the other things to note is that if you go to Öland in the summer, there's also a thing called Beer Safari, which takes you, you basically get a Land Rover trip, so you go to Fireside Brewery, you go to Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri, and you'll also go to Köpingsvik as well, and you can try all the different beers from the 3 breweries on Öland there. There used to be another brewery on Öland as well, but from what I gather, that has closed down now, and there's only the 3 breweries. So basically, on Öland, they've got a brewery for every kind of 8,000 people or something like that. There's only about 25,000 people living on Öland, but a very, very beautiful part of Sweden, and somewhere that I do recommend that you check out if you get the chance. But yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer then. So a few things about this actually. The name of this beer I thought was quite funny. For a couple of reasons. The name Dunder actually comes from the old grain crushing machine that was restored by Olaf and put into the brewery, but I don't know if it's intentional, but Dunder is kind of similar to the word Dunderhead in Scotland, and if someone's a Dunderhead, they're a bit of an idiot. It's an old, quite an old sort of slang word that, and I'm really not sure with the name whether that's intentional or not. It'd be quite funny if it wasn't, and that's just what the name of this thing is. But yeah, a few things about the Scotch ale style then. So this whole thing about a Scotch ale, wee heavy, those two terms were coined by the Americans when they took the beer style over there. In Scotland, these beers to us would just be shilling beers. So the shilling was the sort of, how would you say it? The shilling was what was there before pence, if you like. It was before the pound was decimalised, essentially. So the way that this style of beer, that the Scottish beers used to work, was with the shilling system. So at the bottom end you would start with 30 shilling, and at the top end you would have 90 shilling. And it was all to do with the tax that was on the beer based on the alcohol content. So the 30 shillings had the lowest amount of malt, thus the lowest alcohol, and thus the lowest tax. You would gradually work your way up from 30 shilling to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and 90 and so on, and progressively you'd get more alcohol out of these and you'd have to pay more tax on them. So these beers were all coined with the shilling system. Most of the beers that you get from America that are called Scotch ales, wee heavies, they tend to be around the sort of 80, 90 shilling mark, but you can get a few lower alcohol ones that are about the sort of 50, 60 shilling mark. A good example of a sort of 50, 60 shilling one would be the Robert the Bruce from Three Floyds Brewing in Munster, Indiana, whereas if you take the Bastard beers, for example, from Founders, they're probably more akin to the sort of 80, 90 shilling, if you like. And the ones that we have in Scotland, you get a few of the breweries that brew the traditional lower alcohol ones, whereas the newer kind of American style craft breweries, they'll brew the sort of 80, 90 shilling type beers, if you like. So yeah, really interesting just to talk about that. I always enjoy talking about the Scotch ale. So we'll talk about in this review exactly what shilling this one would be, and we'll just need to see how we get on with it in that regard. But yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. There you can see the Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri symbol there, which is quite nice. Looks like it's just kind of flowers or something like that. But there you can see the sort of background to the label there. I'm not sure how well that's going to show up on the camera, but this one is the that's the grain crushing machine that was brought out of retirement. It tells you a little bit on the back about this beer as well. So it says Dunder is a tasty beer of the Scottish type. It's named after the malt machine, the malt crushing machine that was basically retired and brought back into service. And then it starts to talk a little bit about the flavour as well. It says it uses British hops, which will be English hops because we don't grow hops in Scotland, and I'm guessing that it will be I'll be curious to know whether it's a bit of Scottish malt in there, but it tells you a bit about the flavours, but we'll ignore that because that's what we're going to talk about. But a plain red bottle cap on this one, 330ml bottle. I think I paid like 35 crowns, maybe 40 for this one, something like that, but it comes in at 6% ABV. That suggests that it's probably going to be around the sort of 50-60 shilling mark, if you like. So yeah, without further ado, let's get this guy out and we will get on with the tasting then. I'm really curious to see how this beer turns out. Only my second Scotch ale from Sweden, if memory serves me correctly. I need to see if I can get that Nils Oscar one actually. But let's get it out and into the glass. And I'll tell you straight away, you can smell a nice little bit of the fruity quality out of this beer. We'll talk as well whether this one does actually fit the more kind of traditional Scottish take on the Scotch ale, or whether it comes across as being more American. The traditional Scottish ones are always quite toasty and grainy, but have a nice little bit of kind of well-fired brown sugar to them, whereas the American ones are just a little bit sweeter, and the fruits in the Scottish ones are a little bit kind of darker and more medicinally, whereas the American ones are a little bit more kind of juicy and things. So yeah, as you can see, this beer is actually poured. It's almost like a very dark sort of blood orange. It's not too far away from what you would expect from an American double IPA or something like that. Normally a Scotch ale would be a little bit more a kind of mahogany colour than this, so I would say that the colour of this one is not quite as dark as you might expect from this style. You can see there's about a third of a frothy, I would say creamy coloured head to this one. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, quite a few little ones just heading up towards the bottom of the head there. But overall, I would say the colour of this one, while it's not a million miles away from what you would expect, the colour of this one is a little bit lighter than what you would maybe normally expect from a Scotch ale. You would expect this style just to be a little bit darker in colour. This one's more along the lines of a double IPA in terms of its appearance, but I'll tell you something, when it opened up, the aroma was really quite, it really kind of struck a chord, if you like. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Oh yeah, that smells, it smells like a traditional, one of the kind of Scotch ales that one of the traditional breweries at home would brew actually. I think this one really is going to be like a sort of 50-60 shilling, something like that. But I will say the aroma comes across as really authentic actually. So thumbs up to Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri for this one. They have got a really nice take on this one. So yeah, straight away with the malt base then, you're going to come across a really nice, almost brown bready quality to the beer. A lot of nice biscuit in there. It almost smells a little bit like Werther's Original butterscotch kind of thing actually. But yeah, some nice brown bready notes just forming the base of this one, kind of Werther's Original sort of thing. A little bit of a sweet caramel in there. Almost a little bit honeyish, to be honest. It's definitely got a little bit of that McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. In terms of the brown sugars, this beer is really almost quite light and quite airy, to be honest with you. It's almost like if you have caramel sauce on an ice cream cone. That's what it really reminds me of. But yeah, there's a few sort of woody undertones to the beer, but mainly the malt base is quite Werther's Originally biscuity, a little bit of caramel. It's not really toasted or anything like that, so it's almost like it has the sort of breadiness, the bready graininess in this beer comes across as very authentic, but I think the way the brown sugars and stuff come out in this one are, they're a little bit sweeter, if you like. It's got that kind of original quality there, but just the sweetness of the beer is a little bit more American, if that makes sense. But it has the sort of type of brown sugars, if you like, are traditional, but the actual vibe that they give off. This, I think, if you could say that, is a little bit more American. The level of sweetness you get out of them is a little bit more American, actually. So this is quite an unusual beer in terms of its aroma. It really does have a good level of authenticity to it, but it's just a little bit sweeter, I think, than some of these traditional ones that you're going to come across. Back in Scotland, I live close to two of the more traditional breweries in Scotland, and they have a really nice sort of they've got a more traditional take on this style, actually. So I'm curious just to see how this one compares to that. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, then there's a little bit of earthiness there. There's a wee bit of there's a little bit of a grassy kind of floral quality in there as well, and some nice kind of fruity notes too. It's the fruity side of this beer is a little bit figgy. There's not really a raisiny sharpness or anything like that, but there's a little touch of a kind of blackberry, blackcurranty thing the more you kind of linger on it as well. I've just noticed the camera is moaning about its memory. We'll pause it a second and then we'll come back and actually taste the beer. Right guys, apologies about the edit there, that just happens sometimes. But as I always say, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But we're going to have a taste of this one now and see how we get on. So this one is the Dunder, a Scotch ale coming in at 6% ABV from Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri over on Öland here in Sweden. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål. Right, okay. That's quite interesting, actually. This beer, it's almost a little bit more kind of bready and things like that. It's almost as if you took the Scotch ale and made it a little bit Czech. It's interesting that, actually. In fairness, you know, at the same time, if we're talking about the shilling series of beers, it could be somewhere around the sort of 40-ish shilling. I mean, it comes across as a very low alcohol beer, this one. It's the breadiness that really strikes me about this one. It has that almost Czech, lagery sort of breadiness to it, which is quite interesting. It's a nice beer, don't get me wrong on that at all. It's just a little bit kind of unusual. The aroma of this one is very authentic, but this is more, I think that the flavour profile of this one is a little bit different to what we'd, what I think would normally be expected of a Scotch ale back in Scotland. But it's a nice beer nonetheless, make no mistake about that. I wouldn't hesitate to drink this again, I'll say that. So yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this one then, because I think this is quite an interesting beer. There is a good level of authenticity about this one. I just think the way that certain flavours come out almost, there's a little bit of an almost just Czech vibe about this beer, to be honest with you as well. So yeah, straight away in the middle of your palate you're going to feel that nice brown bready malty quality, that just blankets the middle of your tongue. The further you go into the aftertaste as well, you're going to feel a little bit of the graininess just pushing its way out of the beer. And that's where the authenticity of this one comes from. You do expect a traditional Scottish brewed Scotch ale to be that little bit grainy, and you can feel those notes further on in the aftertaste. But a kind of lovely brown bready quality sitting on top of that. If you move further into the centre of your palate, you start to get the kind of toasty, brown sugary notes, and again that's another mark of authenticity with this beer. I was thinking from the aroma that it would be quite butterscotchy and stuff, and it does have an element of that, but the kind of darkness and almost syrupy toastiness that the brown sugars have in this beer is a little bit more authentic, if you like. So yeah. So yeah, very centre of your palate, that kind of oily, brown sugary note. As I say, as you move further out from that, you start to get a little bit more of a kind of biscuity kind of thing in there. If you go to the front corners of your palate and then move in a little bit, it does get a little bit kind of woody. You can really feel a little bit of a woody undertone to this one, and the more and more that you drink of this beer, the more the kind of graininess comes out actually. The more that I drink of this beer as well, the more kind of authentic it becomes. The way that the bready notes in this beer come out though, they do come across as almost just a little bit cheeky for me, and I like that actually. It's almost a little bit of a kind of quirk to the beer. I've really been recently getting more into my Czech beers and German beers and stuff like this, and the lagers. You know, my whole love of lager beers has been kind of rekindled and things like that. But the way that the breadiness comes out in this beer is really quite nice. That's the most quirky thing about this one, I think. But it is a nice beer, and the difficult thing to get right with the Scotch ale is the malt base. And I would say, about most of it they have got right here. It's the breadiness that's a little bit different, but I think that really adds a little bit of character to the beer, to be honest with you, and it makes it interesting to try. But it gets a thumbs up from me, though. As I say, the malt base is the most difficult thing to get right, and I will say that they've done a good job on this one. So yeah, if you get the chance to try this and you like the style, I'm sure you will. Yeah. That is pretty good. It's quite sessionable as well. I mean, the Scotch ales, a lot of people have the impression that Scotch ales are very, very high alcohol and stuff like this, but the ones that are more sessionable like this can be really quite nice beers. What you're going to notice with this one as well is that the more that you drink of it, the graininess starts to push its way out a little bit more, and you do get that kind of distinctive grainy malty quality there that you would expect of this beer style. The English hops are really obvious in this one as well. So we'll talk about the hoppy side of the beer now. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a little bit of earthiness there. It's a slightly darker earthiness compared to German noble hops like Hallertau and Tittnanger, but as you come further forward, it's a little bit herbal, and then as you reach the front corners of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic, if you like, and then round the very front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy and things like that. Behind the front curve of the palate, of course, pardon me, I'm getting a bit of gas out of this one, but behind the front curve of the palate, that's where you get that little oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters start to push their way out of the beer. Going by the flavours that are in this one, I'm pretty sure there's Bramling's Cross in this. That's a really nice hop actually for getting some fruity notes in the beer. It's very popular in bitters and milds and stuff like this as well, and Scotch ales too. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer is kind of interesting too, because it is a little bit quirky. So yeah, when you take this beer in, there's a little teeny bit of a raisiny sharpness there, but very quickly it mellows out. You start to get a more figgy note out of this one, but the further you go into the aftertaste, you're getting really quite a juicy kind of blackcurranty, blackberry note out of this one. But I would say that the figs sort of roll their way out a little bit more later on as well, and the fruitiness in this beer is quite wet, and it really lingers into the aftertaste as well. Some of the brown sugars start to come out. And I would find that the more you drink of this beer as well, the brown sugars do mellow out a little bit. It still has that kind of more oily brown sugary darts as well, but you start to get those kind of Werther's Original flavours that I was talking about as well. Maybe a wee teeny bit of diacetyl or something like that. But overall, in terms of flavour, this beer, it has a lot of things about it that are really quite authentic, but I think the breadiness that this beer has, that underlying breadiness, is just a little bit almost Czech, if you like, which is kind of interesting. But they do, I'm guessing they will be using either Scottish or English malt in this one, but there is just something to me that makes me think that this is almost a little bit of a kind of Czech influence there. Maybe they're using a bit of German malt in here too, or something like that, or even Czech malt actually. I'd be curious to know about that, but it is a nice example of the beer style, to be honest, and it's a little bit of a kind of quirky version, if you like. I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again, so this Scotsman approves of the Dunder Scotch ale, if you like. In terms of the mouthfeel of this beer then, I would say that this one it's a mid-bodied beer. The carbonation's really smooth. It has the oily mouthfeel that you'd expect. Yeah, it is more of an oily mouthfeel. There is a degree of wetness to it as well. Stylistically, if we talk about this one in the shilling series, I do think a sort of 40 shilling is probably where this one would lie on the scale. So this is one of the ones, in terms of its alcohol, it might be more nearer a 50 or a 60, but I think in the flavour profile and the way the malt comes out, it is a little bit more like a 40 shilling or something like that. Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll go with a 40 shilling rather than a 50. But the breadiness in this beer, I think, is really what gives it the quirk. The malt base is really smooth. It's got a degree of sweetness to it as well. You do get a little bit of that graininess that you'd expect out of it. You do expect a traditional Scottish Scotch ale to have that little bit of graininess to it. There is a little bit of hoppiness to this beer. I think we're only talking somewhere in the region of 20 IBUs with this one, but it's also got a really nice juicy fruitiness to it as well. But a very nice example of the Scotch ale style, and like I say, just cool to find another example of this style in such a random place in Sweden, but authentic in a lot of ways, just with a little bit of an almost kind of Czech twist to it, if you like. So yeah, that's the Dunder Scotch ale. It's 6%. From Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri over on Öland. A really nice example of the style, and I'm glad that I was able to try this for you. So I really hope that you guys have enjoyed my take on this beer. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri as well. I'm sure I'll return to these guys at some point in the near future, and if you get the chance to try some of their beers, I highly recommend that you do. Make sure you check out my social media, make sure you check out some Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri beers, and I will catch you guys very soon. The Dunder Scotch Ale is 6% ABV from Skedemosse Gårdsbryggeri in Köpingsvik over on Öland. Slàinte, skål, cheers.